Chapter 1. A Crash in the Wasteland. The vast expanse of Orion. 7 stretched endlessly beneath its ashen skies, its barren surface a graveyard of forgotten ambitions. Once a vibrant trade hub brimming with interstellar commerce, the planet had fallen into decay after the war. Its cities, now skeletal ruins, bore the scars of orbital bombardments and decades of abandonment. This was no place for the living except for those who had no choice. Finrook belonged to the latter. A man running from a past he couldn't erase, he had carved out an existence on Orion, 7 among the wreckage of a civilization long gone. His days were spent salvaging what others had left behind: scrap metal, discarded technology, and the occasional relic worth trading. It wasn't a life he had chosen, but it was one he understood. Machines, at least, didn't lie or betray. On this particular day, Finn was knee-deep in a tangle of rusted pipes and broken circuitry, his salvaged drone buzzing lazily nearby. He had found the remnants of an old cargo hauler, its engine core mostly intact, though covered in layers of soot and grime. As he worked, the whirring hum of the drone punctuated the otherwise oppressive silence. "Another day in paradise," Finn muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. The arid wind offered no reprieve, carrying with it the faint metallic tang of the ruins. He barely noticed the distant rumble at first, dismissing it as thunder from one of the frequent electrical storms. But as the sound grew louder, a low, guttural roar that seemed to shake the very air, Finn looked up. A streak of fire blazed across the horizon, moving erratically, like a comet dragged unwillingly from its path. "What the hell?" Finn's voice trailed off as realization dawned. It wasn't a meteor, it was a ship, spiraling out of control. The vessel's trajectory was steep, its speed alarming. Flames licked its hull as it fought against gravity, debris peeling away like dead skin. Finn watched, transfixed, as the ship disappeared beyond the ridge. Moments later, the ground beneath his feet trembled violently as a deafening explosion shattered the silence. A plume of smoke and fire rose into the air, its dark tendrils clawing at the heavens. Finn stared, his heart pounding. Crashes were rare on Orion, 7. The planet was too far from major trade routes to attract much attention. Whatever had brought this ship here, it wasn't by chance. "Damn it," Finn muttered, slinging his toolkit over his shoulder. He climbed onto his hoverbike, the engine sputtering to life with a reluctant growl. The drone, sensing movement, zipped to his side as he sped toward the crash site. The crash site. The journey was treacherous, the terrain uneven and littered with jagged debris. Finn navigated the wasteland with practiced ease, the hoverbike stabilizers compensating for the rough ground. The smoke plume grew larger as he approached, its acrid scent stinging his nostrils. When he crested the ridge, the sight before him made him pause. The ship was a mangled wreck, its once sleek form now a twisted amalgamation of metal and fire. It was clearly alien in design, its iridescent surface marred by blackened scorch marks and deep gashes. Shards of debris were scattered across the landscape, some still glowing faintly from the heat of re-entry. Finn dismounted and approached cautiously, his hand resting on the plasma pistol holstered at his hip. His boots crunched against the charred ground as he scanned the area, his eyes alert for any signs of life or danger. "Anyone alive in there?" he called out, his voice cutting through the crackling of flames. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, a faint groan reached his ears, barely audible over the hiss of escaping steam. Finn's pulse quickened as he climbed over a section of broken plating, following the sound. He found himself staring into the shattered remains of what had once been the cockpit. Amidst the wreckage, slumped against the control console, was a figure. At first glance, Finn thought it might be a humanoid automaton. The being's silver-blue skin gleamed like polished metal, its surface seemingly unmarred by the crash. But as he drew closer, he realized it wasn't an automaton at all. She was alive. The alien woman. The woman's form was otherworldly, her features both delicate and striking. Her hair, a cascade of shimmering white, framed a face that was simultaneously familiar and alien. Her eyes, though closed, glimmered faintly beneath translucent lids, as though illuminated from within. She wore a suit of intricate design, its material pulsating faintly with a bioluminescent glow. Finn knelt beside her, his instincts as an engineer taking over. Her breathing was shallow, each inhale accompanied by a faint wheeze. He hesitated for a moment, then reached out, carefully pressing his fingers to her neck. A pulse weak, but steady. "All right," Finn muttered, glancing around the wreckage. "Let's get you out of here." It wasn't an easy task. The twisted metal and sparking wires made every movement perilous. Finn used his plasma cutter to clear a path, the device emitting a sharp hiss as it sliced through the debris. He worked quickly but carefully, his focus entirely on freeing the woman from the cockpit's confines. After what felt like an eternity, he managed to lift her from the wreckage. She was lighter than he expected, her frame deceptively fragile. As he carried her toward his hoverbike, the drone buzzed nervously, its sensors registering the unstable energy readings from the ship. Yeah, I know," Finn muttered, glancing back at the wreck. "We'll deal with that later." He secured the woman to the bike as best he could, using his jacket to cushion her against the seat. With a final glance at the smoldering ship, he revved the engine and sped off toward his workshop, the smoke plume fading into the distance behind him. The workshop. Finn's workshop was a ramshackle structure nestled in the shadow of an old mining complex. It wasn't much, just a converted storage unit filled with tools, scrap metal, and half-finished projects, but it was home. As he pulled up to the entrance, the drone zipped ahead, activating the overhead lights. Inside, Finn laid the woman on his workbench, brushing aside an assortment of parts and tools to make room. Her breathing had stabilized slightly during the ride, but she remained unconscious. He grabbed his medical kit, cursing under his breath as he searched for anything that might help. "Let's see what we're dealing with," he said, his voice low. Carefully, he examined her injuries. There were no visible wounds, but her suit was damaged, its bioluminescent patterns flickering intermittently. Finn frowned, his fingers tracing the material. It was unlike anything he'd encountered before, soft and flexible, yet impossibly durable. "Definitely not from around here," he muttered, reaching for his scanner. The device beeped softly as it analyzed her vitals. The readings were strange but stable, her body temperature and heart rate far outside human norms. Finn exhaled slowly, setting the scanner aside. He didn't know what she was or where she came from, but one thing was clear: she needed help. A fragile connection. Hours passed as Finn worked to repair her suit, using what little he could salvage from his workshop. The process was painstaking, each adjustment requiring delicate precision. As he worked, he couldn't help but wonder who she was and why she'd ended up on Orion 7. Just as dawn began to break, the woman stirred. Finn froze, his tools clattering softly onto the bench. Her eyes fluttered open, revealing irises that glowed with an otherworldly light. She blinked slowly, her gaze focusing on him. "Where?" Her voice was soft, melodic, but tinged with confusion. "Where am I?" "Safe," Finn said simply, stepping back to give her space. "You crashed. I brought you here." The woman studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, to Finn's surprise, she smiled faintly. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Finn nodded, unsure of what to say. For the first time in years, he felt something stir within him, a flicker of purpose, buried beneath the weight of his solitude. He didn't know who this woman was or what had brought her to his broken world, but one thing was certain: their fates had become intertwined. Chapter 2. Fixing the Unfixable. The dim light of morning filtered through the cracks in the workshop's walls, casting a soft glow over the cluttered space. Finn sat at his workbench, staring at the unconscious alien woman he had rescued hours earlier. She was still weak, her shimmering white hair framing her serene yet foreign face. Her bioluminescent suit pulsed faintly with a rhythm that seemed tied to her breathing, a living technology Finn couldn't begin to understand. Finn exhaled, rubbing a hand across his face. "What the hell did I just get myself into?" he muttered. He had spent most of his life fixing things, machines, engines, even the odd weapon, but this was different. She wasn't just another salvage job. She was alive, and somehow, saving her felt like the first meaningful thing he'd done in years. His drone buzzed near his shoulder, its sensors fixed on the woman. Finn glanced at the device and sighed. "Yeah, I know. She's not exactly your standard operating procedure." The drone chirped in response, its small display flickering with a warning about her unstable energy levels. Finn frowned, turning his attention to her damaged suit. The material was unlike anything he'd ever encountered, flexible yet impossibly durable, its faint glow dimming in uneven pulses. He carefully touched one of the damaged areas, the material responding by rippling faintly beneath his fingertips. Living tech, Finn murmured. He'd heard stories of advanced alien civilizations using bioengineered materials, but he'd never seen it firsthand. Whatever species she belonged to, they were far beyond the rudimentary scrap he usually dealt with. Awakening. Finn was deep in thought when a faint voice broke the silence. Where am I? His head snapped up to find her awake, her glowing violet eyes fixed on him. She sat up slowly, wincing as she moved, her hands instinctively brushing against the damaged sections of her suit. You're in my workshop, Finn said cautiously, stepping back to give her space. You crashed. I pulled you out of the wreckage. She blinked, her gaze darting around the room. The alien nature of her appearance was striking, elegant yet otherworldly, her translucent skin reflecting the faint light. Finally, her eyes settled on Finn, and she spoke again. Who are you? Finn Rook, he said simply. And you are? She hesitated, as if weighing how much to reveal. Liara, she said finally. Her voice carried a melodic quality, like music wrapped in words. Finn nodded, his expression softening. Well, Liara, you're lucky to be alive. That crash. I'm surprised you made it. Liara's hand moved to her chest, where a small device embedded in her suit blinked weakly. My ship, is it intact? Finn shook his head. Barely. It's a miracle it didn't disintegrate on impact. But the hull's trashed, the power core's leaking, and half the systems are fried. You've got yourself one hell of a fixer-upper. Liara's shoulders sagged, her luminous eyes dimming slightly. Without my ship, I can't return home. I can't dash. She stopped herself, her voice trembling. Finn hesitated, then spoke carefully. Look, I don't know where you're from or why you're here, but I'll help you. I'll do what I can to fix your ship. Liara looked at him, surprise flickering across her face. Why would you do that? Finn shrugged, his gaze dropping. Let's just say I know what it's like to feel stranded. Assessing the damage. Later that day, Finn and Liara made their way back to the crash site. Liara moved slowly, leaning on a makeshift crutch Finn had fashioned for her. Her body was recovering, but her suit and ship remained critical. When they reached the wreckage, Liara's expression tightened. Her ship, once a gleaming testament to her people's technological prowess, was now a broken shell, its sleek hull scarred by flames and impact. Finn circled the ship, assessing the damage. His experienced eyes took in the fractured power core, the mangled control systems, and the shattered cockpit glass. It was a mess, but there was potential. Well, Finn said, wiping grease from his hands. It's bad, but not impossible. Liara stood beside him, her luminous eyes scanning the wreckage. You think you can fix it? Finn nodded. Might take some time. I'll need to fabricate parts and scavenge others, but yeah, I think I can get it running. A faint smile tugged at Liara's lips. Thank you, Finn. Her gratitude caught him off guard. He wasn't used to people thanking him, let alone trusting him. He cleared his throat awkwardly. Yeah, well, don't thank me yet. This thing's got tech I've never seen before. I'll need your help. Liara nodded. I'll do what I can. Repairing the ship. Over the next several days, Finn and Liara worked side by side, rebuilding her ship piece by piece. Finn marveled at the complexity of the alien technology, its seamless integration of biology and machinery. Liara guided him through the intricacies of her systems, her explanations equal parts technical and poetic. Your people are incredible engineers, Finn said one evening, as he welded a piece of hull plating. Liara smiled faintly. We were once explorers, seeking to understand the universe. Our technology reflects that, designed not to conquer, but to harmonize. Finn glanced at her, his curiosity growing. Why were you out here then? Orion, 7 isn't exactly a tourist destination. Liara's expression darkened. I was running. My world is no longer what it was. My people, they've turned on each other. I had to leave. Finn nodded slowly, understanding the weight of her words. Yeah, I know a thing or two about running. Liara looked at him, her gaze softening. Then you understand why I need to finish this. If I can repair my ship, I might be able to find a way to save what's left of my people. Finn exhaled, his determination solidifying. Then we'll make it happen. A connection forms. As the days turned into weeks, Finn and Liara grew closer. Their shared work on the ship became a bridge between their vastly different worlds. Liara's quiet strength and unwavering hope began to chip away at the walls Finn had built around himself. One night, as they rested by a small fire outside the workshop, Liara spoke softly. "You've been kind to me, Finn, but I sense you carry a heavy burden." Finn stared into the flames, his jaw tightening. "I used to be an engineer for the Frontier Fleet, built ships, fixed systems. But during the war," he hesitated, his voice thick with emotion, "I lost people, good people, and I couldn't save them." Liara reached out, her hand resting gently on his. "You blame yourself?" Finn nodded, his gaze still fixed on the fire. "It's why I came here. Figured if I couldn't save them, I didn't deserve to be around anyone else." Liara's fingers tightened around his. "You're wrong, Finn. You saved me, and I believe you can save yourself." The chapter's ending. The next morning, Finn stood in the workshop, staring at the nearly completed ship. It wasn't perfect, but it was whole again, a testament to their combined effort. "We're close," Finn said, turning to Liara. "One more push, and you'll be ready to fly." Liara smiled, her eyes shining. "Thank you, Finn, for everything." As they prepared for the final repairs, a shadow passed over the workshop. Finn looked up, his stomach sinking. A ship sleek and menacing descended from the clouds, its weapons trained on them. "Looks like someone else knows you're here," Finn said, grabbing his rifle. Liara's expression hardened. "They found me." The chapter ends with Finn and Liara bracing for a fight, their bond stronger than ever as they prepare to face the enemy together. Chapter 3. The Fight for Freedom. The hum of the descending ship reverberated through the workshop, rattling tools and sending loose bolts clattering to the floor. Finn and Liara exchanged a glance, the unspoken question hanging between them. "How did they find us?" Liara's luminous eyes hardened. "They're hunters. Once they catch a trail, they don't stop." Finn grabbed his rifle from the wall and checked the charge. "Well, they're about to learn they came to the wrong place." Liara moved to the ship they had spent weeks repairing, her hand brushing over its smooth hull. The vessel gleamed under the workshop's lights, its alien design now whole again. But it was far from operational. Its power core hummed faintly, still not fully integrated into the systems. "We need time to get the ship online," Liara said, her voice steady despite the tension. "Can you hold them off?" Finn gave her a lopsided grin. "I've held off worse." Outside, the enemy craft settled onto the cracked ground, its landing gear hissing as it touched down. The ship was sleek and predatory, its dark hull adorned with glowing red runes that pulsed like veins. As the ramp lowered, a squad of heavily armed figures emerged, their armor gleaming under the ashen sky. The first wave. Finn positioned himself behind the makeshift barricade he had built outside the workshop, a wall of salvaged metal reinforced with thick steel plating. He peered through the scope of his rifle, counting 6 soldiers advancing in a tight formation. Their movements were precise, their weapons sleek and unfamiliar. "They're not here to talk," Finn muttered, adjusting his aim. He fired the first shot, the plasma bolt searing through the air and striking the lead soldier in the chest. The figure staggered but didn't fall, his armor absorbing most of the impact. The others immediately returned fire, their weapons unleashing rapid bursts of red energy that slammed into the barricade. "Figures," Finn said, ducking behind cover as the metal hissed and sparked. Inside the workshop, Liara worked quickly, her hands flying over the ship's control panel. She connected wires and calibrated systems, her bioluminescent suit flickering as she pushed herself to her limits. The ship's interface responded sluggishly, its damaged core struggling to stabilize. "Come on," she whispered, her voice a mix of urgency and desperation. "You're stronger than this." Outside, Finn was locked in a deadly game of cat and mouse. He fired carefully, each shot aimed to disable rather than kill. One soldier's weapon exploded in his hands, sending him sprawling. Another fell as Finn targeted the exposed joints in his armor. But they kept coming. Liara joins the fight. The workshop door slammed open as Liara emerged, her hand glowing with the faint light of her bioenergy. She raised her other hand. A crystalline device clutched tightly in her grip. The relic hummed with power as she activated it, sending a pulse of energy rippling across the battlefield. The soldiers hesitated, their systems momentarily disrupted by the wave. Finn used the opening to disable 2 more, their armor sparking as they collapsed. "You sure you're okay out here?" Finn called, reloading his rifle. Liara's glowing eyes fixed on him. "I won't let them take me." Another wave of soldiers emerged from the enemy craft, accompanied by a towering figure clad in ornate armor. His presence was commanding, his helmet adorned with glowing red sigils that matched the runes on the ship. He carried a massive energy blade that crackled with raw power. "Liara of the Celestial Sovereignty," the figure called, his voice amplified. "You are charged with treason and the theft of forbidden technology. Surrender now, and your death will be swift." Liara's jaw tightened, her voice cutting through the chaos. "I did not steal what was already mine." The figure raised his blade, pointing it toward her. "Then you will face judgment." The standoff. The towering commander advanced, his soldiers fanning out to flank Finn and Liara. Finn cursed under his breath, his mind racing for a solution. The odds were stacked against them, but retreat wasn't an option. "Got a plan?" Finn asked, firing at an approaching soldier. Liara didn't answer immediately. She stared at the commander, her eyes blazing with defiance. Then she looked at Finn, her expression resolute. "Buy me 2 minutes." 2 minutes for what? "To finish what we started." Finn didn't hesitate. He stepped out from behind cover, drawing the enemy's attention with a barrage of suppressing fire. The soldiers returned fire, forcing him to dive behind a nearby stack of crates. He fired blindly over the top, his shots buying Liara the time she needed. She retreated into the workshop, her hands trembling as she connected the final circuits in the ship's core. The vessel's systems flickered to life, its interior glowing with renewed energy. "Almost there," she whispered, her voice a mixture of hope and fear. The turning point. Outside, Finn was running low on ammunition. The soldiers were closing in, their relentless advance pushing him closer to the workshop. He gritted his teeth, his mind racing for a way to stall them. Then he heard it, a low hum, growing louder with each passing second. The ship. The enemy soldiers faltered as the repaired vessel emerged from the workshop, its engines roaring to life. Liara stood on its ramp, her suit glowing with energy as she activated the ship's defensive systems. A turret swiveled into position, firing a precise burst that scattered the soldiers. Finn scrambled to his feet, relief flooding his chest. "Took you long enough." Liara extended a hand, pulling him onto the ramp as the ship began to lift off. The enemy commander roared in frustration, his blade slamming into the ground as the vessel ascended. "We're not done yet," Liara said, her gaze fixed on the enemy craft. Finn followed her gaze, his stomach sinking. The enemy ship's weapons lit up, targeting them with deadly precision. "Any more tricks up your sleeve?" he asked. Liara smiled faintly, her hands moving over the ship's controls. "1 or 2. The escape. The ship's engines roared as it climbed higher, evading the enemy fire with deft maneuvers. Liara's hands flew over the console, her connection to the ship almost instinctual. Finn manned the weapons system, firing bursts of plasma at their pursuers. The battle in the skies was intense, each maneuver pushing the ship's systems to their limits. But Liara's skill and determination proved unmatched. With a calculated burst of energy, she disabled the enemy craft's engines, sending it plummeting toward the surface. As the enemy ship disappeared into the distance, Finn slumped in his seat, his heart pounding. "You weren't kidding about those tricks?" Liara turned to him, her expression softening. "I told you I wouldn't let them take me." The chapter's ending. As the ship stabilized, Liara set a course for deep space, her hands trembling slightly as the adrenaline faded. Finn watched her, his admiration growing with each passing moment. "You know," he said, leaning back in his chair, "for someone running from their past, you've got a hell of a fight in you." Liara smiled faintly, her glowing eyes meeting his. "And for someone who claims to be broken, you've got a lot of heart." The ship disappeared into the star-studded void, leaving the broken world of Orion 7 behind. Together, Finn and Liara had faced the impossible and survived. But their journey was far from over. Chapter 4. Healing Among the Stars. The ship drifted silently through the void, the faint hum of its engines the only sound in the cockpit. Finn slumped in the co-pilot's chair, his rifle resting against the wall. For the first time in what felt like days, the tension in his chest eased. They had escaped Orion 7, left behind the pursuit, and were finally free. Or so it seemed. Liara sat at the helm, her hands resting lightly on the controls. The bioluminescent suit she wore pulsed faintly, mirroring her steady breathing. Her violet eyes scanned the ship systems, ensuring their trajectory was stable and their enemies no longer on their trail. "You're quiet," Finn said, breaking the silence. Liara didn't look at him. "There's much to think about." "Yeah, like how you're going to explain that whole running for my life with forbidden tech situation," Finn said, his tone light but his gaze steady. Liara turned to him, her expression soft but tired. "It's not a simple story." "Got nothing but time now," Finn replied, gesturing to the expanse of stars outside the viewport. "And after everything we just went through, I think I've earned a few answers." The truth about Liara. Liara exhaled, leaning back in her chair. The ship's dim lighting accentuated her otherworldly features, making her seem both ethereal and deeply human. "My people, the Celestials, were once explorers and builders," she began. "Our technology was meant to harmonize with the universe, to bring balance and understanding. But over time, factions within our society grew restless. They wanted more power, more control. They saw our technology as a weapon, not a tool." Finn listened intently, his curiosity growing with each word. "When the fractures began, I was a voice for peace," Liara continued. "But those who sought power saw me as a threat. They accused me of treason, claiming I had stolen the relics to use them against the ruling council. In truth, I took them to keep them out of their hands." Finn frowned. "So, the hunters back there, your people sent them after you?" Liara nodded. "Collier, the one who led the attack, was once my closest ally. Now, he's their enforcer." "And the relic?" Finn asked. "What's so special about it?" Liara hesitated, her gaze dropping. "The relics are more than tools. They are the essence of our civilization, fragments of the stars, imbued with energy that can reshape reality. In the wrong hands, they could destroy entire worlds." Finn leaned back, running a hand through his hair. "Great. So not only are we fugitives, but we're carrying a weapon that could wipe out half the galaxy." Liara smiled faintly. "It's not a weapon, Finn. It's a key. A way to rebuild what was lost." Finn met her gaze, his expression softening. "Then I guess we better make sure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands." A shared burden. The days that followed were a strange mix of routine and discovery. Finn and Liara worked together to maintain the ship, their bond deepening with each passing moment. Despite the vast gulf between their worlds, they found solace in each other's company. One evening, Finn stood in the engine room, tinkering with a coolant valve that refused to stabilize. Liara appeared in the doorway, her bioluminescent suit casting a faint glow. "Need help?" she asked, her tone light. Finn glanced at her, a smirk tugging at his lips. "You offering, or are you just here to supervise?" Liara stepped forward, her hands deftly adjusting the valve. "You're good with machines," she said, "but this ship requires a different touch." Finn watched her work, her movements precise and graceful. "You really care about this ship, don't you?" "It's more than a ship," Liara said softly. "It's my last connection to home." Finn's smirk faded, replaced by a look of quiet understanding. "I get that." Liara looked at him, her expression curious. "Do you miss your home?" Finn hesitated, the question stirring memories he had buried long ago. "I used to, but the truth is, there wasn't much left for me there. Orion 7 was my escape, a place to disappear." Liara studied him, her glowing eyes filled with empathy. "And now?" Finn met her gaze, a faint smile crossing his lips. "Now, I think I'm starting to find my way back." A new threat. Their fragile peace was interrupted one morning when the ship's sensors flared to life. Finn and Liara rushed to the cockpit, where the console displayed an incoming vessel. It was small, fast, and closing the distance rapidly. "Not again," Finn muttered, grabbing his rifle. Liara's hands flew over the controls, her expression tense. "It's not one of Collier's ships. The signature is different. That's supposed to make me feel better?" Finn asked. As the ship approached, Liara activated the defensive systems, readying the plasma turrets. But before she could fire, the comm system crackled to life. "Unidentified vessel, this is Captain Jorn of the Eclipse. We mean you no harm. Requesting permission to dock." Finn frowned. "Think we can trust them?" Liara's gaze was wary. "We don't have much choice." Reluctantly, Finn nodded. Liara deactivated the turrets, and the Eclipse docked alongside their ship. Moments later, the airlock hissed open, revealing a tall figure clad in utilitarian armor. His face was weathered but kind, his eyes sharp and calculating. "You must be Liara," Jorn said, stepping forward. "Word of your escape has spread farther than you think." Liara's expression hardened. "And you are?" "A friend," Jorn said simply. "One who knows what it's like to fight for survival." A fragile alliance. Over the next hour, Jorn explained his purpose. He was part of a rebel network dedicated to dismantling the corrupt factions within the celestial sovereignty. Liara's actions had inspired others, sparking hope in those who had once felt powerless. "You're a symbol now," Jorn said, "whether you like it or not." Liara frowned. "I didn't ask to be." "Heroes never do," Jorn replied. "But you have the relic. With it, we can tip the balance." Finn crossed his arms, his skepticism evident. "And what's stopping you from taking it for yourself?" Jorn met Finn's gaze, his expression serious. "The same thing that brought me here. Trust." The room fell silent, tension thick in the air. Finally, Liara spoke. "If we do this, we do it together. No betrayals. No hidden agendas." Jorn nodded. "Agreed." The final decision. As the Eclipse departed, leaving them with coordinates for a hidden rebel base, Finn and Liara stood in the cockpit, staring at the stars. "You think we can trust him?" Finn asked. Liara hesitated, then nodded. "We have to." Finn sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Guess we're not running anymore." Liara smiled faintly, her hand brushing against his. "No, we're fighting. Together." Finn looked at her, his own smile forming. "Guess that's not such a bad thing." As the ship powered up and entered hyperspace, their path clear, Finn felt something he hadn't felt in years, a sense of purpose. Liara had come into his life like a comet, shattering his solitude and forcing him to confront his broken soul. Now, together, they would face the stars and whatever challenges lay ahead. And for the first time, Finn didn't feel alone.